Blessings and welcome to Reasonings right here at Your Life. I'm your host, Jerome Sage Butler. Yeah, it's beautiful to be here with you once again as we can share in, deeper, continuous offerings of information, the plethora of thoughts that you've been thinking about, somewhere deep within your own mentalities, your own emotions, and your own little special grouping. Yeah, and sometimes your little organizations as well, too, right across the spectrum of possibility and abilities, right? Yeah, it is always a joy and a pleasure to be able to, bring these, thoughts, these offerings, these vibrations from inner space, as we try to bring it into this outer world experience to animate it and bring a little bit more clarity and vibrations, of well-being in that space. So we're gonna give thanks, to Yahuwah for making it possible always that we can share these videos and we just ask you to like, share, and subscribe to True Life Television Network. And as we, expand this work and we give thanks for all our supporters, the people who have always been donating to keep, this channel going, and for the people who've been a part of the very process of what we do as well too. We give thanks, to the whole True Life family. Yes, and I want to send a big shout out to Sister Rachel, original Trail Life that is now residing in my community. So blessings to Rachel. Yeah, original Trail Life. So today's offering, I would say, is a little bit different, from some of the previous offerings, and it might receive or it might be received by some in varied manner, and so when I thought about it, it was directly coming from spirit, so I had to express it. Pardon me, because there was so much of the opposite thought that was out there, and it has saturated so much that I guess the spirit felt it necessary to bring a balancing, to the experience of our spiritual experience. So the current offering is silence is overrated. Whoa, I can hear a lot of people saying, did you just say that? And I know why some people might think so, or might even say that. Because, the issue is like, we've been taught spiritually that the world is filled with noise, chaos, and this chaotic, experience kind of forces us to go into this space that is said to be the space of silence, right? And it is almost given as a opposite to the experience of the world. Like silence offers the meditative, qualitative life that you are missing in the world of sound and sounds and sound activity. So I thought, like many people, that I needed to escape sound. So I started my journey of meditation trying to get into the space of silence, right? And so when I got into the space of silence, I found some interesting things. But one of the things I did find that did correlate with what others said was that you did feel a sense of like, removal, detachment from what is the perceived chaos of the outer world, and the world of functionality to a world of like just being and presence. For a moment, I did feel that. But because I am a intense personality, and anyone who knows me know that, right? I mean, I'm intense on both spectrum. That's why we try to balance to keep the good in the central focus. So because I'm an intense individual, when I got into the realms of silence, and yeah, I did have that experience, I thought to myself, well, this is kind of very cool. But because I'm not necessarily configured just to the mental space of what is being programmed into me, I had more experiences. So one of the other experiences I had was I realized that after a while, silence wasn't so silent anymore. I don't know if people have experienced this, because sometimes we think, oh, it only happened to me, but actually it happens to quite a lot of us. But I'm not sure about that, so I'm presenting my experience. Silence suddenly got so loud, it became kantara, agitating. Very, very agitating. It was so intense that, yes, I did feel that I was more than the form-based ideas that were functional in the outer world, but it was so unnatural to me. Not, I don't want to say totally unnatural, but it was so dysfunctional to me that it made me weary, right? And the more I stayed in the silence, the more I heard noise, kare. The more I heard on a jarring, nondescript, non-functional noise. So I wasn't really karse. I wasn't really impressed. So I left the whole silence ideology, and that was my experience. Saying that, I know that's not everyone's experience, but we're gonna expand more on both the silence and why I say silence is overrated. So that was my experience of the silence. So I haven't gone through that now. I kind of thought to myself, whoa, maybe there is no such thing as this internal harmony that people are talking about. Maybe it's just a flow of energy, vibrations, frequencies. So I thought to myself, how would I then be able to recognize, just like how I was trying to recognize patience in this reality as not a word but a spirit, a functionality. I was trying to figure out where is silence in the midst of all of this. So then, I live in the mountains, right? And there's a lot of things happening. And so the first thing I could draw upon when I try to put my whole idea together in some cognitive, thought process, the spirit reminded me, growing up in the mountains, what have you noticed? And it's going to be interesting when I tell you because it's so embedded. Well, let's say I observed in a awed silence, right? So it's not really a silence, but an awed silence, because when you stop to observe, you realize that things kind of stop. So that's what I mean, awed silence. So we can debate that intellectually. So in this awed silence, I realized that, okay, the ants have their season. What do I mean? There's a season where they are more prevalent and they cover everything and they're everywhere. And then there are flies, and then there's a season where you see more lizards, and there's a season where you see more birds, and there's a season where you see more the fly we call ginger fly and sour fly, the ones that devour the fruits and the fruit flies. And there's a season where all of those things come in, like just a season when the mangoes are on the tree and the apples and the guinep and the pimento. Where am I going with it? Okay, so when I saw these seasons and saw these creatures and the flora behaving a certain manner, the spirit was bringing back to me what was being noticed. I said, whoa, there was this intense sequence to it, and I was like, well, everything has an order to it, like a rhythm, like within the functionality. And it's just like and then after a little bit I got what it was saying. When the flies came, there was no silence. When the ginger flies came to devour the mangoes or the fallen animals, or the fruit flies come to devour the fruit or to devour the remains of the fruit, there was no silence. There was a sound, a music. And the spirit was teaching me to remember, say, I used to appreciate that music. It was literally a music. You think I'm joking? Okay, let's go with fruit flies. I can't do every sound. They go. And it's like a lot of them making that sound, right? And then you have the flies like, and all that sound is happening around me. So the insects are doing, the flies are doing, all the creatures, the dogs are barking, you understand me, the trees are creaking, and everything is just going, you understand me, and the crickets are nice, and all the night creatures. So then what became obvious was the orchestra of sound, the functionality of silence, because when you are so into the silence, right, when you're so into the sound, you don't notice that within the matrix and the functionality of the sound, that is where, hallelujah, the silence is. Not an absence of sound. The sound is right there in the silence, and the silence is right there in the sound. Here is the issue now. If sound is really silence, then what is this drive that we're asking for to go into this formless, nondescript space? I can tell you what it is as how I understand it. The drive towards what we call silence is because we are living an aberration of sound, a disharmony of the sound spectrum. Because when the sound spectrum is harmonized, there is a rhythmic balance, right? Circadian to life. The Rastafari community culture call it the 1-2, and that's the 1-2 heartbeat, right? So in Tree of Life, we call it 1-2 heartbeat telegraphics. Wow, sounds big. I've mentioned it on other channels, so I can actually break it down here. So what is heartbeat telegraphics? Well, we're saying the heart beats a certain rhythm, but then there's a rhythm that is image, sound, wave balance, contrast, the whole heartbeat telegraphics. Thinking, breathing in vibratory images, images that resonate sound and all the spectrum of frequency. The heart, the 1-2, it is actually the music of life, the correlation of the cells in the being, or the fibers, the very living particles, members, portions, right, that make up the living being, harmonize to a music of life. Circadian to many, 1-2 heartbeat to Rastafari, 1-2 heartbeat telegraphics to Tree of Life, right? An image, sound, resonance spectrum. That is what that means. The essence of sound then, in disorder, creates malfunction, dysfunction in the psychic telepathic bodies, and therefore sets the one individual or individuals, depending on if the spectrum is being promoted, this disharmony that is, will force individuals to want to mitigate that imbalance in the sound spectrum. The obvious thought of a lot of deep philosophies, especially because it is promoted one-sided and unbalanced in this age, is to suggest that some kind of internal emptying of the external, even if it's momentary, is what is necessary. And then what happens is that the imbalance really just basically it fractures, and it switches poles, right? And goes that silence now becomes more like an addiction and not the necessity of the function wherein sound and silence is harmonized. On the sound spectrum, where it is harmonious sounds, there is a word that we use to represent that harmonious selection of sound through composition and arrangement. So we say music, right? And I think that comes from in this idiom language, the muse, which is the Greek terminology of the goddesses that inspire creativity and the essence of, you know, the creative reproduction of sounds that is like the orchestra of life itself. So the water, though seemingly in its own aura, doing its own journey, when it goes over the stones, creates a music that has a pitch and a decibel that really causes the heart to resonate on a certain frequency. So when music is set from like the heartbeat and the rhythm of nature, because it is already proven that if you go out into the woods, and especially like into a bamboo patch, because it's more evident that you can hear it in the bamboo patch, because of how the wind reacts to these trees that are hollow inside, some dry, some not so dry, there is literally a rhythm that is heard through the syncopation of the wind going through the trees, and these bamboos releasing the tension, the gases through heat and movement. A sound spectrum, you know, appears. Now, there are a few scientists who have actually gone and recorded the sound spectrum, and they have proven that it correlates with what we call universal rhythms. Oh, yeah, yeah. Universal rhythms are what I would turn back to the circadian, that which is, it is unanimous, it is equal amongst all beings, right? There's an equanimity in it. All of us produce it by the very function of life itself. The essence of all of this, when it's organized, arranged, like the orchestra of life, and you are imbued in it in you, when you're functional in it, then the sound that you are, that you have become, in its harmony, is the silence. Composers, arrangers of musical works are more aware that without the sound and without that silence, there is no music. So essentially, when a vocal frequency, a note, whether through the or the vocals or through an instrument is resonated, for your brain to process and hear it, and for it to have, that connection, resonation, and understanding in your psyche, for you to relate to it, you have to have that silence, that space is not negative space. So what is that space? It is the space of the subtler reverberations. It is the state of the subtle reverberation. Those subtle reverberations that are the low audible sounds, they let the inner ear register the sound, its importance, its connection to emotionality, to mentality, to behaviorality, to physicality. And within split second or a few moments, if you're a little bit dumb, numb, or detached, then you see the manifestations that the intent of that vibration, that sound, moves the individual in correlation, and there's this harmony. And so that lower reverberation of sound that we call silence is how it is placed into its formulation, or it is transmuted into other vibration. And this is where the telegraphics coming, like text, right? This is where the visualization coming, that if you are still enough, quiet enough, when the sound spectrum comes in, reverberates into what we call the silence, then we get through that sound, silence, reverberation, the imaging, and the imaging, the imagery of the idea, of the origination of that concept can become clear. This is the kind of deep thought that poets play around with in terms of how they have layered and embedded the concepts of words, ideology, and its morphication and transmorphication into this form of something that is plausible and functional. That though you're hearing this amazing, imagery, tapestry, flowetry of words, in the essence of that flow, in its arrangement, in its meter, in its metronome, is a vibratory essence that is up to that creator to fashion, and the really in tune minds pick it up. If it is thoughts of transformation, after listening to such a deep work of art, one's mental processes begins to ooze with this sense of connectivity to causalities that have caused disenfranchisement or the need to right collective wrongs, right? If it is spiritual, it touches that deep tajmel, that deep inner space in the soul of human beings, that you come out radiant, resplendent in an aura that cannot just be defined by the functionalities that are before you. Then people would say, well, there is an aura of Yahuwah. That is upon you. That resonant, resplendent aura vibrates that inner space within another. So it becomes correlative. They are transported to that place. This harmonization in the orchestra of life, I guess, is what some may say they seek in the absence of sound for this imbalanced notion of silence. But where silence is the sound harmonized, therefore equalized, then we transcend a lot of the fixed rigidities, of our left brain mentalities. This need to didactically, dissect and so-called analyze the premise of our lives versus going with the flow, yielding to the music of life, to the very essence of the divine pantheon, that all these things in the orchestra of life creates the silence, and therein is the sound. Because as we speak, I'm here, and even if this instrument can only pick up a few microns of the sounds that is around, I can still hear within this perceived stillness the river that is a few moments away from me. I can hear it. I can hear it rolling through with a specific sound. When I'm most aligned with that sound, this essence of the transcendence become real. In essence, it's like people would say, I am the river. Because we're identities born in a form, this formlessness, this music of our presence, this orchestra of life, we become. Hey, we become because it is us. And there in silence and sound, harmonizing the spectrum of presence and being. And in this presence of being, this divine functionality, there's an awesomeness of what life essentially is about. So, in taking patience to put yourself back into the right key, the right chord, the right arrangements, so you can break the discordant vibrations that is making life an aberration, to very organized, harmonious, and melodious note structure. How do we do that? Well, it starts first with your breathing patterns. You've got to realize that, like I said, sayamashe, in the breathing, in the heartbeat, in the circulatory organism of the circadian is a music actually. And when one begins to breathe in this music, then all the scales begin to become apparent, the pentatonic and the 8-pointed scales that have been derived thereof, right? And the 21 sequence scale system for those deep breathers, right? All of that is contained in the breath, in the rhythm of the breathing. That when both the exhalation and the inhalation is on a resonating spectrum, then the vibratory frequency begins to align and awaken and function. Then harmonies happen. People say they have premonitions, right? They have psychic visions and dreams because that harmonious spectrum, which is beyond the no spectrum, the no construction of time and space, to where there is no time and space, beyond time and space, which all activities have their place, right? Both the beautiful and the grotesque, right? That resonating stream, that resonating, flow of divine vibration connects us to that. Because now that we know we are more than a form that is pinned on a point in time, we are endless notes that are sequenced and circulating the circadian. This string resonance of the very aura of our being is the silence and the music. Intertwined is the silence and